The Five Rings Podcast with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramee on the Sports Podcasting Network. Follow us and listen to us live on Twitter at Five Rings Podcast and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network for more content.
Good day, good night, and welcome to the Five Rings Podcast. I'm Kevin Laramee. This is our live show for day 13, reviewing one of the last Thursday of these Olympic Games for sure. That was quite an eventful day on the track, in other spheres, team sport, gymnasium. I watched some handball. We watched a whole bunch of things over the last 24 hours. Duane, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I've been up since 4:30 yesterday afternoon. So, it's getting near the end of my day. Excited to get back up in a few hours to watch our friend Evan Dunphy finally compete.
Yes. 4:30 p.m. today. 4:30 p.m. today, the 50-kilometer race walk, which means it starts at 4:30 a.m. at Sapporo time, or 5:30 a.m.
5:30, yeah.
Yeah, it's Sapporo, which is, multiple hundreds of kilometers north of Tokyo, by the way.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be hotter there tomorrow than it is in Tokyo, which is just
of course,
hilarious.
which is of course that's how these games have been. It's Murphy's Law, 2020.
Yeah, you know what? We said it the other day that the Japanese organizers deserve credit for running this pretty smoothly, and I had to look at their COVID numbers today too. Just I was curious. It hasn't been reducing in any way, but they haven't had a spike, so that's a positive, and that's what I would have anticipated. But I know that. There are others out there that are more nervous about such things. So you can rest assured that there has not been a visible spike in numbers because of the Olympics, and that's a good thing. So, yeah, all in all, you're right, though. There's been some bad luck, including the wind and the rowing and the typhoon.
A freaking typhoon. And, a few bad luck for the organizers. So this is the Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong might or will go wrong in Tokyo 2020.
Yeah, but I know Evan was not very happy about the decision to move outside of Tokyo, and she's not happy about a lot that they're doing because they don't really respect his discipline, the athletics folks or the IOC, because they can't sell tickets to it, is what he would say, and he's probably on to something. But he's going to get a chance tomorrow or today, I guess. At this point, I'm sure he might even be just finishing his sleep up and getting on the shuttle at this point. So that's a lot of excitement there. So, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to go for a little walk myself today, a speed walk.
just to get ready. Why not, Duane? To put yourself in the mood?
Yeah, well, I did actually I challenged myself to match not his distance, because that's nuts, but to do a similar time. And I'm not going to be able to do that today, but I'm going to be able to do that. So I'm going to walk 3 hours and 40 minutes in honor of Evan. Sometime in the next couple of weeks. I've trained for that for about 6 months, and I can do that. I'm pretty sure I can, and I will probably walk about 23 kilometers during that time, whereas he will walk 50 kilometers, which tells you a little bit of a difference between it. But today I'm going to do a 10K walk today because I need exercise too. I was saying off air, you asked me how I was doing. I said, I'm good, but I'm run down. And that's the truth. It's the great irony of watching the Olympics or covering the Olympics is you're watching the greatest pinnacle of sport, but you're absolutely eating crap and not exercising.
Welcome to the world of journalism, where it's pretty much my life, where right now I don't even have time to make me food. So it's easier to press a button on the phone and someone gives you food.
Yeah, I know a place in Toronto that makes really good pizza for 24 hours a day. So last night at 4:30 a.m. I ordered pizza. So, but that's in my defense, that's dinner at that point.
Right? Yeah, of course. You put an egg on it and it's breakfast. There's always a time for pizza. Pizza is always a good decision.
Fair enough. So that's my little dilemma. So yeah, I'll let you know tomorrow how my 10K walk went today, but we'll go from there.
I watched the 400-meter men's final today. Gold medal for Stephen Gardner of the Bahamas. Congratulations. It was a fun race, and it's a fun, I guess, just a little, like it's to me it was fun to watch this earlier today with my coffee, and I wanted to mention it. Duane, we'll talk about a few things during our medals, of course, and we have things that we want to talk about. We found ways to put in our medals today, but There's one thing that you wanted to know and you asked me over the last couple of days, and it's Kevin. Kevin, what the F is the Kieran? Because it could be seen as a weird race if you don't know what it is. It's one of the races of the track cycling. Canada actually got a medal. We'll talk about that later today. But it's on the track. And yes, there's a motorbike. In this case, it's an electric Derny. It's called a Derny, the bike, Duane. And there's an idea that the bike is there to ramp up the speed. Because the goal is not to find who has the best acceleration from 0 to 40. They're all track athletes. They have thighs the size of my house, okay? It's big athletes. But it's to find who can outsprint everyone, who has the tactics and the power at that speed to outwit and outlast and outsprint everyone. So 3 laps behind the Derny bike, you go from 0 to 40 kph, kilometers an hour. And at that point, the Derny goes in, and then it's 2.5 laps with the bell for the last lap of sprint, of mayhem, or tactics. There's a bunch of riders, and the goal is to finish first, second, or third. You get a medal when you get to the final, but it's a 2.5 laps of jousting, of saying, you going? Am I going? Who's going? Sometimes someone will go really, really early, like 1 lap in of the 2.5 and trying to get a lead, and then the pack have to work together to get there. So that's the idea of the Kieran, is you have 2.5 laps to try to either outwit that small peloton or to work with it to catch the one breakaway, or whichever tactics you want to try. You got 2.5 laps after the Derny bike goes in.
So, okay, yeah, like what I love about this track cycling race is that I'm more of a parachuter when it comes to this sport than Kevin is. Between games, if I wandered upon it, I would absolutely stop and watch, but I wouldn't instinctively seek it out, right? So these events come up, and I kind of remember them, I kind of don't, and the rules, like, they make sense when you watch for 2 seconds, but they all seem like, to an outside eye, like, how did they ever come up with this idea? So hearing that, I think that they came up, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that they probably came up with this test as an idea to sort of break a road race down to the very essence of the end when you have a sprint finish at the end. It's kind of measuring who's best at that in a way.
Yeah, but even more than that, because usually if you think about just a sprint, if you could think about a road race in cycling and the sprint aspect, Mark Cavendish for our Great Britain listeners, or any other type like Andrew Greipel back in the day, those will be good, and they'll actually sprint for not even 100 meters. That they'll go full clip for 100 meters. They'll stay behind someone the entirety of the race for that 100 meter. It's a bit more than that. You need a bit more tactical awareness, and you need to be able to not get caught behind and to gauge the effort of others, because if someone goes out and actually laps the group, there's no way they're going to catch them, right? So there's little things, in 2.5 not enough to lap the entire peloton, but that's the tactic behind it. So it's if a sprint was longer and you take away all the build up to it. So it's to keep the legs fresh too, so that you basically really gauge the powerful aspect. It's not an endurance race. It's really to gauge the powerful riders in track cycling, because you do have team sprint, team pursuit, and you have the Omnium. I don't even think the Omnium is there anymore, but that's used to be a point race, and that's more endurance. So it's basically to differentiate. Some events are more for endurance athletes, so track cyclists, and some of them are more for powerful track cyclists. It's basically look at the width of the shoulders and the legs. If they look like human beings that are Hulk in cycling suits, well, it's for the powerful athletes. And if they look like a bit more thin or more profiled and cut the wind, they're more for the endurance side.
Yeah, it's funny to see them out there, the juxtaposition between the two types, because for instance, the sprinters, like the individual match sprint ones, they look like cartoon monsters.
Yes, the neck just blends in with the shoulders.
Yeah, and and they're on this tiny little bike, so it's insane to look. But Yeah, there was a points race, and it wasn't a points race for medal on its own. It was the multiple event, similar to the decathlon, which we'll talk about later for the. So that was tonight as well. I watched a lot of the cycling tonight, and the one I liked, and I knew of it, but I forgot about it until I saw it again today. Is the one where the last place rider drops off after every lap or every 2 laps.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun one too. It's all these events in the track cycle. Move on after this. All they remind me of stuff that. If you were to put like 100 kids on a playground and give them bikes and tell them to invent games, they'd kind of come up with this stuff.
Yeah, and they killed themselves probably in the process.
Well,
but
we used to do growing. We used to race our bikes around the school all the time.
Of course. Imagine if you had a track with 45 angles side. No, but of course.
It's like there's a creativity in like the young, right? And that's what I love about the track racing. They kind of make like, okay, we're going to race around 50 times. And after every 2 laps, the person in last is eliminated until there's only one person left. Like a kid would think of that. And it's brilliant. That's what sports is like.
Yeah. And it's also that way you don't exert too much energy because track cyclists usually do more than one event, right? So it's all thought about this way. But at least today we learned, if you're listening to this for the first time and you didn't know what the Kieran was, well, now you know. So total of 5.5 laps. 3 laps behind the Derny once again, 0 to 40 kph. Then 2.5 laps of Mayhem Sprint on the line. Go watch it on demand if you missed it. It was a great event at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Let's go ahead and start our medal conversation for today. And it is to the IOC, the Organizing Committee of Tokyo, of course, and FIFA. Because after days of tractations, finally, it took a long time, almost 4 days ago, Canada and Sweden asked the IOC and FIFA to change the kickoff time of this game. It was supposed to kick off at 11 a.m. in the morning, Tokyo time. That's like blazing sun time, 40 degrees Celsius, 45, 46 degrees pitch side on the pitch. And that's insane. It took a long time, and finally they decided to change the time, and now it will take place at 9 p.m. local time under the lights. It'll still be humid, but at least it won't be sun blazing, and it'll take place 8 a.m. Eastern for us on Friday morning. It's still on the same day for Tokyo, but instead of taking place in the morning, it's taking place later. Still, for the athletes, not even a day before that game, they have to change their routine and figure out how to peak at that time. The benefit, though, is closer to the time that they have played over the last few weeks than it would have been for their 11 a.m. kickoff. So that's a positive, but still not ideal having to reshuffle your schedule around peaking 15 hours later than you originally planned.
Yeah, well, it's the same for both teams, and they have to, obviously, when it comes to competitive balance, it's about 3 hours later than they've been used to in this tournament, although Canada played a lot of 4 a.m. games. So
exactly, so it's interesting.
Look, this was just, hopefully they told the teams a little bit earlier, and they weren't just trying to flip on a switch, but they would have had to prepare for both possibilities, and that's not ideal, to say the least. And what I found kind of glaring about this is that, look, there's factors involved here that aren't necessarily about gender. But when you think about, and we talk about this all the time on Soccer Today, you can go all the way back in our archives and listen to us all the way into the lead up to the 2015 Women's World Cup, which is held in this country in Canada, and there was controversy over the surface it was being played on. So we've been covering these kind of issues for a long time, and I don't necessarily think that this is about that, but it's going to be perceived and viewed as that, and that's like in terms of it being inequality to the women, right? They're forcing them to play in the middle of the day. Why are you doing that? Like, why aren't you giving them a primetime slot there rather than worrying about it here? And that's the thing. The reason the game was going to be there is because NBC assumed that the U.S. women would beat the Canadian women, or they assumed that U.S. women would beat all of the women because this was way back when that they set the schedule, and therefore they would have this great primetime event for them. But even in that case, like, why are you prioritizing NBC? I know they pay a lot of money for it, over the safety of the damn athletes. Like, that's just really callous. It goes back to what I said a few minutes ago about not being able to sell tickets to the race walk, right? So
newsflash. Entities care about pockets, not people. But, I guess I'm it's actually beautiful to see that people are still naive about this. But, it is what it is.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously that's what they did. It's just frustrating. Like, at some level, you have to be somewhat reasonable about this. I mean, it's unfortunate because they would have got to play if they had scheduled this game more properly. They could have. This was in the actual Olympic Stadium. I mean, there were people out there saying, and I've heard it still, that no, the women get to play in the same place that the men get to play the gold medal game. Well, that's actually not great because the women were in the better stadium prior to this, but nonetheless, it's fine. It's happening now. It's not great for people outside it either that were maybe plans. I know I have some expat friends that live in parts of the world where they can't they'll be at work when this happens, and now they can't watch the game. Now, that's not what they shouldn't worry about that either, but it's just unfortunate that they had this last second switch and they didn't give people enough time to plan it.
Exactly.
Like here, we were planning viewings here in Canada because this might be the only time that this country ever plays in a major final of a football tournament. Let's be honest, in my lifetime, it's possible. It's likely even. So, we wanted to do it the best we can. And now with, 12 hours notice, basically, I don't think those things can happen. But it's just unfortunate on a lot of levels.
Yeah. Also, 8 a.m. is when you can start selling alcohol. So,
Yeah, well, no, I'm not. Yeah, or eggs. I don't really care about the alcohol at 8 a.m. I won't know what ends up. If I had one beer, I'd probably be asleep at 8 a.m. after I've been up for 60 hours. So,
that's the thing. No illicit substances or alcohol because you're going to fall asleep covering an Olympic. And then you don't know when you're going to wake up. Could be 3 days later, like, what? I missed everything that happened. Exactly.
Yeah. The closing ceremony. But those nightmares I have in the lead up to the games, I've told you on this before. I'm so neurotic about the Olympics that I will wake up in a cold sweat 6 months out thinking that I've somehow missed like 2 days of the games. And that's like the worst thing that possibly happened to me. I'd rather have a dream. Oh, I lost all my legs and, I only have 4 more weeks to live. But did I miss any of the Olympics?
No. My family's all dead, but the Olympics are still tomorrow. Perfect. I'm good to go.
Okay, good. I distract myself.
Okay, good. At least I can just numb myself with the Olympics. That's what it's all about.
Well, dark. Pretty dark. We're day 13. We're getting into the dark.
We're getting into the dark jokes. All right, let's talk about something more positive. Let's talk about our poutine medal for day number 13, and it is Laramee and Duane, because we talked about the track cycling, we talked about the Kirin, and since 2015, this show has been talking about a facility in particular in Milton that is helping the entirety of the sports in Canada. And we had examples of the Pan Am Games and other places. Of course, the Pan Am Games in 2015 in Toronto, talking about the Milton Velodrome. But since then, other places, Commonwealth, and other games, we did good in track cycling because of that velodrome. Heck, there's a national training center, and there's a place, and they hold World Cup events, and lo and behold, before winning a bronze medal at the women's Kirin race for Laramee and Duane, the 23-year-old actually won in February 2020 with her partner the Milton Track Cycling World Cup in team sprint. They are getting better at that level. And at the Kirin, she crossed that line in the final third. So after 3 laps behind that journey bike, electric for the first time ever, by the way, this has to be said, she was able to complete this 2.5 laps in perfect position and finish third in this competition. This is a direct result of investment done in the GTA area on that Milton Velodrome. And it's not just for Ontario athletes, that's a beauty, it's for the entirety of the sport. Laramee and Duane resides in Montreal, also from Lévis, Quebec. She's won a bronze medal because 7 years ago now, we built a facility.
Absolutely, yeah. And look, I've been saying this a lot on Twitter and on the show, obviously, that the TO 2015 legacy stuff, we're starting to see the dividends to it. It's quite clear as day. One of the members of the women's eights, which won gold medal, came from that program, came through that as well, right? Like, this is all, sorry, I'm getting mixed up a different program I had, but the bottom line is initiatives that started around that have already created Olympic champions, is what I'm trying to say. And this is a theme of this show, the 5 Rings, which has been running since 2014, sometimes weekly, sometimes with delays, but it has been around in some capacity now for 6 years or for 7 years. And throughout that time, we have talked at length about how much infrastructure matters to producing champions, and we talked a great deal in the early days of the show about TO 2015. Part of that is because it was in my city, and that was what sort of excited us to continue this project after the Sochi Olympics, and has led us to do thousands of shows together since. It was
thousands, literally. We're not even exaggerating.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a big part of everything and a big part of my legacy. And I still think of those games all the time. And a lot of people in the city I was in were very negative about them at the time. Not everyone. I was at a lot of events during them. I can tell you firsthand that the people that went out and took their cynicism aside and enjoyed them for what they were had a great time. And I just kind of want to shove it up the nose, we'll say, of those that were also negative at the time. Oh, no, there's nothing good about this. Oh, God, help me. I'm going to be 2 minutes later getting home.
So you're not allowed to cheer when Penny won a medal the first time. So that's what gives you. So it's what happens,
And the two big venues that were left were the two biggest venues were the Velodrome and the Olympic-sized swimming, which there was not an Olympic-sized swimming pool in the GTA, which accounts for 1/3 of Canada's population. So now there is, and now look, go figure, we're producing Olympic champions. There you go.
Well, same. Why do you think there's so many divers coming from Montreal? You think it's because, well, guess what? We have an Olympic diving facility, and it's just renovated in the pool, and so that's why when you look at the makeup of the Canadian national teams in diving, in swimming, and in cycling, usually it geographically gravitates towards Milton for cycling, and then there's like constricted circle all the way up to where I am, and the same thing for pool here, and now it's going to start in Ontario. But that's our poutine medal for today to Lauriane Genet, because she is a definite example of all that great work, and also amazing on the track itself. Fun to watch. We talked about the Kirin earlier, and the bikes themselves are beautiful. Did you know, and this is maybe your funny fact of the day, if you're going to look at that bike and look for a brake, you're going to look for a long time. These bikes don't even have brakes. Like brakes is like, wait, it's cumbersome. Get this thing off of here. I don't need to slow down.
Yeah, you'll note they slow down it's just like speed skate.
And someone catches them. Someone catches them because otherwise they're just going to fall.
Yeah, well, they have an area like in the inside of the track that they can go around in circles until they're going at a reasonably slow pace. But
exactly, and then just touch with your arms like aside, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but it is like if you fall, like it's not. Like I wouldn't say it's dangerous, but all sport has an element of danger to it, and certainly that's part of it.
Well, it is dangerous. One Team GB cyclist, I forget his name, Connor, I believe. Connors actually had, that was a BMX too. A guy got the guy I'm talking about now. He had facial fractures and brain hemorrhage.
Yeah, BMX. I watched that live.
Yeah, the American BMX, but same thing happens sometimes in the track. What's actually the track happens often is collarbone breaks, because how you fall, and oftentimes it's the right collarbone, because when you fall, you'll fall on your right side, right? Because you're going left, so you're going to fall on your right side. Because if you fall on your left side, it's going to be way, way further, because it's like further down.
Yeah,
exactly. So you fall on your right side, but that angle, it's like perfect to just get your shoulders out of its socket and just to pop your collarbone.
Yeah, last thought real quickly. There was actually a second Canadian in that final. So just to underline our point, and that second Canadian played a big role, I think, in getting her the bronze medal, because she took it out, and I think there was a little strategy going on there. 2 Canadians in a final out of 6 people on the track.
That's exactly why the Kirin is fascinating, because, Duane, if I'm like the second Canadian here, if I'm Lauriane Genet, okay, and the other Canadian, we know that one of us is better than the other one, we're going to work together. It's better that one of us gets a medal than none of us gets a medal, okay?
Yeah.
That's how you think about it. And then you'd be like, you know what? I feel good. So when it starts, you go first, you attack the pack. So the entire pack has to work and to extend energy to catch her. And then when they catch her, that's when you launch your attack. So they just launched an attack. You still got a fresh cartridge. That's how you can anticipate that strategy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and cycling, that's very much in the culture of it. And who knows, maybe the other athlete will have an event where the favor can be returned to them one day. So that's, I guess, how that all works. But no, it is a lot. I understand why it's so exciting, and I wish was easier access to it between games, and that's ultimately a lot of stuff I'll talk about with this. I mean, I would love a channel dedicated to this stuff. If anyone from the Canadian broadcasting world or streaming world is listening out there, here's my wallet, but I won't hold my breath.
Hey,
but,
an Olympic channel. Imagine if you're just the IOC. How many hours of footage do you have from the early days? And that's without counting the Criterion collection of all the movies. You could basically just play everything you want, and then, today, this month, special in August, today is Rio week, we replay Rio and look at all this, or today, this week, it's fencing week, we look at the last 10 Olympics in fencing. I would watch that thing every single day.
Yeah, well, there is an Olympic channel.
That's a YouTube.
Yeah, but it's a lot about the narrative. There's a lot of movies about documentaries and stuff.
It's never about the event. I want to know. Okay, let's watch a documentary about the last 10 Olympics, just about fencing and the evolution of fencing, strategy and techniques. And then you see, look, 10 years ago, the Frenchman did this, but now this move influenced everyone. And look at the evolution. We could do so many things with that catalog of content.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I want World Cups is what I want. World Cup of everything. Someplace that consolidates every Olympic sport World Cup series. So you just click on a channel and go, so what's on this weekend? Oh, now there's a biathlon World Cup and there's some curling going on here, and I just click and go. That's what I want. But I basically want the sports producers in the world to produce a channel that is only for my exact taste. That's what I want. So there you go.
That sounds like a very good thing to have. On that note, we'll take a little break. When we come back, we'll start our bronze, our silver, and our gold medal journey for day 13. Back on Fabrics Podcast. I'm Kev Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins, breaking down day 13 and looking at our favorite moments. Our top 3 is coming up, and we start with the bronze, as always. And Duane, I wanted to talk about this gentleman because it's the first time this competition is at the Olympics. Talk about karate here, not the kata. I want to talk about the full contact one. Just like at the All Valley tournament, sweep the leg, do all your Miyagi Daniel-san joke you want. But I'm going to take it even further. Forget Karate Kid. Call Jean-Claude. Get me some Jean-Claude Van Damme up in here, because we're not going to call blood sport. This is Kumite. It's called the Kumite. It was the men's Kumite, 67 kilogram. And Steven DaCosta, Frenchman, francophone, has won the gold medal. He's a legend of this sports, Duane, and that is amazing to me. That a 2018 world champion, someone who has a pedigree in the world of martial arts, that is respected, and that might even do movies and become maybe the modern day Jean-Claude Van Damme. But instead of being from Belgium, from Brussels, instead of being the muscles from Brussels, maybe he'll be something from France.
Yeah, it's too late / early to come up with a great alliteration here.
Well, la savate française, savate is like the French martial art, but I couldn't find something, so I'm just not gonna try.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I watched a bit of the karate last night too, and out of curiosity, of course. It's always difficult to follow the combat sports greatly when you're trying to cover everything else, because you really, to understand a combat event, you really have to drill down on it. This is where I'd like to have a full staff for 5 Rings out there, so that I could have someone assigned to karate, but it's great that it's in there, and it's obvious, obviously the organizing committee wanted something that culturally mattered so much to the Japanese, and they couldn't put sumo in. So karate, they couldn't put sumo in because it's not competed enough, right? There's criteria you have to meet to make an Olympic. I don't know if people know this. It has to. off the top of my head, I believe it has to be on 4 of the 6 continents. It has to be competed at some level. It has to have a national championship at it. It has to have a world championship already, and you have to have a certain threshold of athletes. Like, you can't just pull any sport. Like, if in LA they can't put American football in,
Or bowling. They tried bowling multiple times, and they're going to try maybe again for LA, but we'll see if it happens.
Yeah, exactly. And if it meets the criteria, it meets the criteria, and they can do what they want. Because I think basically the IOC is like throwing up its hands now and said, "This is what we're going to." Well, I know that they've done this. This is what we're going to do. You can bring a sport in for your games, but we're not putting it in permanently unless we want to. So that's why softball, baseball, enjoy it while you can. And I haven't watched a single pitch of the baseball. But anyway, to get back to,
I guess Dominican and the States were together in the semi, so I guess it went chalk. Japan's still there, so I guess it went chalk.
Yeah, it was Japan, Korea. I didn't see what the end result of that is. It's not that I wouldn't watch it, but there's just the sports that I watch all the time. I tend to not gravitate towards. Like, I've seen a little bit of the basketball here and there because it gets shown a lot, but it's not something that grabs me anyway.
So speaking of basketball, I didn't even watch stuff yesterday. I just know that the States were trailing at the half, and I was like, oh, good on you, Australia, but I don't even know who won that game.
The U.S. came back and won quite handily.
Of course they did. That's what I thought. So that's why I'm like, I'm not even going to pay attention. I can go to bed because they're going to come back.
Yeah, it's France-U.S. will be the final, and that actually is compelling. France has
Rudy Gobert! Come on, Rudy! Allez les Bleus!
Yeah, they do have a chance for sure. The French absolutely have a puncher's chance in that. Like, maybe even more so. Like, more like a 33-66. I think I would put that one at. Anyhow, for the 5th time, let's get back to karate for a second. No, it's great that it's in there, and the fact that a legend, someone who had a pedigree in the sport before, could stick around, could get in there, could pay attention to it, and make this happen is I think exactly what these new events, or these demonstration events, we used to call them, which now have medals attached to them. A lot of our listeners might not remember demonstration events, but they're up until like even the Calgary games, because that's kind of curling's first taste on it in Calgary.
92. There was rollerblade. Rollerblade was at the Olympics, like rollerblade, like speed skating on the Summer Olympics.
Yeah, but they were called demonstration sports, and they didn't count in the official
Exactly. Standings. You had medals, but you didn't count the standings.
Yeah, they weren't the same medals. They were like, something, trinkets, basically. It's like all silly. Like, if you're at the Olympics and you won the event you ran, you won an Olympic medal, right? Like, I guess it doesn't matter what you call it. But
on the collectioners market, like the auctioneers market, guess what? They're worth more because they're actually rare. So there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, now they're going to do it this way, and karate made sense to get in there. It's entertaining. It is. It reminds me a lot of Taekwondo in terms of what it looks like. So, if you enjoy Taekwondo and you enjoy combat sports, absolutely give it a chance.
The only difference is it's full contact, and they don't have protective gear as much as Taekwondo, and the rules are a bit more instinctual than Taekwondo. Like, what do you mean I can't hit the legs? Leave me alone, But
I was surprised, actually, if you're used to watching Olympic sports, to see a sport where striking's involved and they're not wearing headgear is kind of takes you back for a second. So that's something.
Well, men's boxing has been doing this for 2 Olympics too, but yes, no, I agree. It's like finally you're like, you know what? The helmet actually might make it worse. That's the whole thing with combat sport is if you put a helmet, you actually will receive more subconcussive blows, which at the end of the day will accumulate to be the same thing, but you won't have a knockout or you won't lose consciousness, which means that the trauma just accumulates with no end. So that's kind of like the thought process, but no, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of boxing, I actually enjoy boxing in the Olympics a great deal, but again, because you're not seeing it as much, it gets out of your mind. America was in a gold medal fight today, and they have 2 more because they have a pretty strong team this year. But it's been like since 2000 since the U.S. has won a boxing gold medal. That's crazy because the U.S.
it was Floyd Mayweather, if I'm not mistaken, in 2000.
Yeah. So wild. They have 2 more chances to win a gold. We've gone all over on this one, but great for this guy in the karate to get his gold medal. Good for him.
Stephen DaCosta, look for him in a theater near you in the next few years in the remake of Bloodsport. This time it's personal. All right, let's move to our silver medal for today. It is Kwan Hong Chen, the 14-year-old diver from China. 14-year-old. Her first international competition, and she wins gold medal. No problem. That's what happens when you don't really, well, when you can't participate in international competition because you are too young. She would not have been made the team if this Olympic Games were taking place last year, but it's not, and she's won a gold medal. She'll be a force to be reckoned with in the 10-meter platform on the women's side because, like, she's 14. She's just going to get even better still.
Yeah, look, I'll reiterate what Kevin said a minute ago, just so you hear it again, and in case you thought you were hearing things. She was ineligible to participate in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics until such time as the 2020 Tokyo Olympics were held in 2021. So she's one of the 7 people in the world that benefited from COVID-19. Seven's a stretch too, maybe. I don't know.
No, there's more because there's a lot of athletes actually, but that's what happens with the cycle is pushed by 1 year. You get these things happening.
Yeah, look, I because of a family connection to the sport have watched diving since I was quite little, and every Olympics, the dive tank and watching diving competitions is a big part of it for me. I probably watched something close to 90% of every dive taken in this Olympics, and what I'll tell you is that although I still enjoy the artistry and the physicality of the sport and watching it and trying to, pick apart a dive when in real time, when, you're on TV and marveling at the ability of the judges to see the tiniest little break in form and all of that stuff. I enjoy it. But there's one thing that has made diving harder to watch in some ways, and that's the brilliance of the Chinese system. There's just no question who's going to win golds anymore. When it happens, it's like a unicorn, right? It happened once in this game. The British team, Mark Daly and his partner, which I forgot now, but
Tom Daly.
Tom Daly, yeah.
Yes, and you said Mark Daly, or I know,
yeah.
but it's yes, Tom Daly and his partner Mark have his diving partner Mark, because partner is he also has another partner, but meaning that it's the only diving competition that a Chinese athlete did not win in.
Did not win, yeah, and they were brilliant, the British and that British team in that synchro competition, but. And we'll see tomorrow when the 10 meter for men start whether they do get the all but one. But they're just so proficient, particularly at their entries. And look, part of it could be that that the system, the Chinese sports system, is able to identify people that have the bodies that they need to rip that water. And if you're a larger athlete, a more muscular athlete, you can struggle to get the rip entry in the same way.
Yeah, you're funneled somewhere else. There's a triage. It's like, oh, you want to be an athlete? Okay, come here. Welcome to the Chinese Olympic Committee. We have a triage. So you take your tape measure, you measure everything. You're like, okay, you don't get to decide. You're going there. Here's your lane.
Yeah, exactly. And like you'll see it in Beijing and in the Winter Games in 6 months, you'll see the same thing. That a lot of these athletes in the freestyle skiing, particularly the freestyle jump, what's it called? That one, the high with
the big air.
Yeah, I couldn't get the name in my head. I'm not in winter zone, but anyway, like that'll be dominated. I bet you that'll be swept to the Chinese. I would put a bet down on it right now because they've been working on that for 6 years and they'll be ready. And that's just how their system works. And we can judge that if we want, and we can say that maybe there's, these people are forced to do it. I don't know. Like they still seem happy when they win, and
it's easy to say that but it's like. That's a very narrow view of the world, and you gotta broaden the spectrum, and it's because you're on the other side of that dichotomy. Because if you're on the other side, maybe it's their choice. Maybe she wanted to be a diver. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, look, we do a similar program here in Canada. They've been advertising it all through the Olympics, the RBC program. They're exact same thing. They were volunteering to show up to be evaluated, but once they're evaluated, they go, "You're a rower. You're a skier. You're a."
And the difference is we take it really, really old because the RBC training ground is for athletes that are already like in a sport and they're already a certain age, like Pierce Lepage, by the way, who finished 5th in the decathlon, is a training ground athlete. He was discovered about 5 years ago by that program, but he was already an athlete, right? So that's the difference. We start with athletes. They start with with embryos.
Yeah, exactly. But at any rate, and look, we shouldn't make too much light of it, but because there are problems when that happens, and USA Gymnastics is a key example of how a system can get so in its own head that bad stuff happens. And we all understand that the Chinese government is not well known for certain human rights, but which is why it's controversial that the Beijing Olympics are being held where they are, among many things, including the weather. However, to get back to the diving program, they're so good at it. They have figured they have a cheat code that the rest of the world just doesn't have. And look, the Canadian team's pretty good. And I, obviously, as a Canadian, will watch them closely. And they've had some brilliant performers. They're all kind of on a bit of a downturn now, or at least a turning over of the athletes that we've seen for years and years.
Yeah.
But when Emily Hyman was there, who was always the third best diver in the world, because that's because there could only be two per country, because had China been allowed to have all the athletes it could, she would have been whatever amount -1 best diver in the world.
You mean there's 8 Chinese divers in the final of the Olympics? Yeah. And China sweeps the 10 positions once again.
Yeah, they're just that much better. Like, and you especially see it on the platform where, like, it's just incredible to watch how proficient they are.
Do you remember?
It terrifies me how many reps they do to get there, but they are still brilliant at what they're doing.
Monday to Sunday from sun up to sundown. Like, do another rotation. I jump in the pool. Anyways, it reminds me of the Romanian gymnastic program in the 80s and 90s. At least it was viewed this way. And when you were just wearing that Romanian singlet and jumping on a beam, you already had 2 points more than everybody else, because they were just looking at the 3 colors and they're like, well, that person knows what they're doing. It's the same for China when you step on the platform or a diving board.
You're right. There is an absolute bias that happens there in any subjective sport. Like, when we're talking in Beijing, we'll be talking about figure skating a lot. And the figure skating judging is a whole other thing. I mean, we've had literal scandals with that. But subjectiveness there, they try and take it out, but it's still a matter of fact that if you come from a country, if you're a Russian ice dancer for a second, you're going to get higher artistic scores just by the virtue of the fact you're wearing the Russian singlet, right? And the same thing could be applied here, but I don't think it is, because like I said, I have been watching. I wouldn't call myself a diving expert by any means, because I did not participate in the sport, but I am absolutely a very informed amateur. It is a sport that I watch between Olympics if it's on. It is a sport that I will look for sometimes between Olympics. I watch it a lot. I can, with some level of authority, say that the Chinese are just better. If there's a bias, it's because they're just so damn good that you can't not give them the marks. Like, there's no way to pick apart what they're doing there. It must be discouraging for the rest of the field. Like, there's been great divers from other places. The Mexican team, for instance, is having a really good games, and that goes. There's a throwback to our first conversation earlier. The Mexicans are a legacy of the '68 games, so don't tell me infrastructure doesn't work. But at any rate,
the difference is they kept theirs running, and they still use it to this day, from Azteca to all the other anyways, don't get me started. Don't get me started on the velodrome, okay? The fucking Valladolid. Anyways,
gonna get the explicit in here today. No.
We're allowed, so it's okay.
Yeah, that's sorry. Quickly, it's an Olympic show, and we're day 13, and I'm punch drunk anyway. The Mexicans are interesting in the sense that they're really, for their population, don't do very well in the Olympics, but they do have a couple exceptions, sports that they're pretty good in. And if you look at why that's happened, it's all tied into '68. They had this fluke race walker in '68 that no one expected won a medal for them, and it's kicked off a boom in race walking in Mexico. And to this day, you will see Mexican race walkers competing at the highest level of the game, of the sport, pardon me. Same with the diving. Diving's, because of cliff diving, and that has always had a certain cultural connection to the country. So because they have the dive tank and the infrastructure there, and they got the coaching, they have a very good diving program, and they do produce medals here and there. And this is a country in Mexico that, outside of soccer or football, really doesn't compete internationally in sports in many things, but they do, and it all stems back to '68. I've enjoyed the diving program a lot. There's one more event. I'll be sad when it's not on at 2 a.m. anymore. It's my 2 a.m. ritual now. 2 to 3 is diving every night for the last.
So that's why I didn't watch it, because that's my nap time.
Yeah, no, it's always CBC and the main network shows it live. It's one of the events they absolutely show start to finish live, every night, 2 a.m. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly when I'm not watching. But we spent 43 minutes, 44 now on this show, talking about everything except the one thing we actually really wanted to talk about, Duane, because it's an historic moment, and we're going to take the time to talk about the historic moment right now, because for the first time in history for a Canadian athlete, and in the 4th time only on the history of sports and in this planet and everything surrounding the galaxy, in the world of decathlon, never a Canadian has performed better. And only 3 other human beings have had similar scores. For the first time ever, it's over 9,000, and we're talking about Damian Warner, gold medal decathlon, 9,018 points. And Duane, I think it's important that we look at all the events because 9,018, it's a new benchmark. It's the new standard. It's the gold standard, literally, in today's decathlon. It's an Olympic record also, but to me, it's the multiple events that he outdid himself. And I think it's important that we talk about it because he was not necessarily that confident heading into 2 events, and the pole vault and the javelin. And he did seasonal best, personal best. Amazing performance. 490 in the pole vault. And there's something about the pole vault competition at Tokyo. There's something about that pole vault, the way it's laid out, that is freaking with the mind of athletes. Because we saw on the women's side from the different competitions, the final was yesterday also, and then we also saw it in the heptathlon. It plays tricks in the mind of the athletes, and there's so many no heights, and I got worried for a bit, but he did the best he's ever done at pole vault. And when that happened, I'm like, well, if he just stays with the Frenchman, he's not going to get beat by 30 seconds by Mayer, and he could get a gold medal. He actually finished in front of the Frenchman in the 1,500 meters. He did his best 1,500 meters ever. What a performance by Damian Warner.
Yeah, it certainly was. And look, I tend to, in a summer games when we're doing these, try to avoid putting Canadian medalists in our medals unless it's something exceptional. And that's because we have the poutine medal, and that's how we acknowledge our Canadianness, and we'll also inevitably talk about it in banters, which is what we call the Spreaker show, banter. Anyway, I try to avoid it, but I don't think there could be any argument that the most impressive performance in the world of athletics, the world of the Olympics today, was the decathlon winner. It would be any time. It is an impressive event. It is a tier 1 Olympic event. Their Olympic medals are all priceless, but there's some that are a little more priceless than others. They are the events that the world pays attention to, and this is one of them. I can make an argument, and time will ultimately tell me whether this is right or not, but I can make an argument that this is the most prestigious gold medal win in Canadian Olympic history. And Canada isn't, the very top of the medal standings in summer games, but they're not at the bottom either. This is a player in the Olympic movement, particularly over the last 25 years. And to say something like that seems a little dramatic, but it absolutely is true. Like it's 4th best performance of all time in this discipline. 9,000 points is nothing to sniff at. And that 9,000 points, that was the only thing really that we were watching in the final, in that 1,500. The gold was done. It was a coronation.
And in the last lap of the 1,500, so when the bell rang, he's like, okay, I got some left in the tank, and I can just leave it on the track. And then he starts running, and and he had to do 4:33. So continues running, and then he gets a bit wide, and he's like, I'm just gonna start overtaking every single one of you. Then he goes by one person, goes by the other, goes by I think he finished 4th. He just ran by everyone, outside of everyone, just ran and went all the way to the finish line. 44:31:08 is personal best in the 1,500 meters. That's how you finish a decathlon, from start to finish on top. Golden couple days for Warner.
Yeah, he led tape to tape, so to speak. And well, he started this thing by they're not world records, they're like best ever in the Olympics perform time for that event. So he did that twice in a row, or best ever in the decathlon history, did that twice in a row.
So they Olympic records for the decathlon.
It's pretty impressive to start that way. And then there is no doubt that with any decathlon, a little luck has to play a role. And Myers did not come in, I think, perfectly healthy. He had to take a lot of last year off, and he's a second day decathlete, Myers, the Frenchman.
That javelin throw, what was it, 73.5, I think, something like that.
Second overall, it was massive throw, so it was near 74.
Yeah, it was 10 meters further than Warner's one, which means a whole lot of points. And usually he's really good at the 1,500 meters too. So he's the kind of guy who was kind of like, he was 6th at the beginning of day 2, finished on the podium, finished 2nd. So
yeah, well, I watch the World Athletics every 2 years, and we'll be happy to watch it next year. But I always pay attention, particularly to the decathlete. It's a great thing about watching the World Athletics is you can pay a lot more attention to everyone in the track and field. If you love this in Olympics and you haven't sought that out before, seek it out, because on a pure sporting perspective, you're not going to get all the cultural stuff around it. You're not going to get all the like ADHD loving like flip here stuff, but you can hyper focus on that for a week, and it's a great event to get to understand these athletes more. So when the Olympics come on, you can enjoy them more, right? Anyway, the Doha decathlon, Duane Myers was firing on all cylinders, but that second day stuff was so important because in that one, shot put really knocked Warner down. He didn't get a great shot in Doha, and even at the time, I was like, well, he's still leading. And the commentators are like, well, that's it, because they're doing the calculation in their head and they know how big Mars' second day was, right? And anyway, the German ended up, he ended up getting hurt, but the German came to nowhere. But it was because Dane didn't put enough points up in the first day. But yesterday, he was just off the charts. Like, we could have legitimately given him one of the medals yesterday for his performance, because it was kind of clear that he was going to win. Yeah. But we thought we'd wait. His shot was a all-time high. His pole vault was an all-time high.
Yeah, well, let me say a shot put, 14.8 meters, as you can see on your screen. Pole vault, 4.90. Best performance for him ever. He's never done those in competitions before.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing, right? It's the only thing that the decathlon fails. Why the decathlon isn't bigger than it is in terms of watching is because it's hard to understand who's leading at any given time. Like, if you don't know this stuff for a neophyte coming in. But it just intuitively, you got to understand that if someone can go in and do such multiple and diverse events, then you got to just chip your hat. Like, I ran track, and I could do, there's two of those events I would not be able to get points in at all, like 0. Right?
Pole vault,
and that's
pole
a lot of
vault.
athletes. It's high jump and pole vault.
I was going to say too. For me, it's like, because long jump, we got a whole lot, but I'm not going to, can I clear 3 feet? Yeah. 4 feet? Sure. 5 feet? And then I'm done,
Yeah, elite points table, I might get 600 points total, but that's I at least get some points in some
exactly.
of them. I wouldn't clear height.
I'm going to throw that discus like a frisbee just to make sure that I get some point on the board. But when we're looking at Warner, of course, there's a narrative of him failing at the top level. The gold eluded him at the world stage, on the little world stage, so Pan Am, if you're talking about. He did win in 2015 in Toronto. He did win in Peru in 2019 also. He did win the Commonwealth Game in 2014, but since at the really world stage, it was second. The Indoor Championship in 2018 in Birmingham, he finished second. Also, in 2015, the World Championship in Beijing, he finished second with the silver. Of course, his big rival for a long time was Ashton Eaton, the American, a legend in this sport. He's now retired. In 2013, he finished third in the World Championship in Moscow, bronze. And in 2019 in Doha, he finished with a bronze too. And in Rio, he finished with a bronze too in 2016. This is his first Olympic gold medal. His record, 9,018 points. It will be remembered as one of the best Canadian performances ever. And of course, we have 2 of those performances almost back to back this week, with Andre de Grasse winning gold yesterday. So that's it feels like forever ago. It happened like 24 hours ago. He actually ran in Canada, doing all right in the 4x100, which should have been maybe a wood medal. The Americans trying to practice the handing of the baton, would you?
Yeah, exactly. I think that we have done a good job of avoiding using the wood medal to be mean to athletes who had a bad day this time.
I agree, because it's so easy to do. It's so easy to have a bad day, and for us to use the wood to give to just be negative would have been so easy too.
Yeah, I prefer it that way. I mean, we know when there's disappointing performances out there, and maybe when we do. We'll do a wrap-up show for the whole Olympics where we give our overall medals, and we maybe will on that show talk about things that disappointed us, which will, it's a sport, so we can talk about that. But I don't think it's necessarily the right spirit of what the wood medal is supposed to be about. But at any rate, yes, the Americans failed to the 4x1 today, and it was the first time in history that the Americans did not qualify for the final for a reason other than being disqualified.
Yeah.
So they finished the race and did not qualify. That is the first time that's ever happened on time. That's incredible, and it shows you how important it is to have specialists and people that know how to pass that baton. And if we could be Canadian centric for a second, you look at our 3-4 runners in the 100, they're not, in terms of their baseline 100-meter times, the fastest guys, but they work on this. That's their specialty essentially, and they know that they have. 3
out of the 4 were in Rio, winning that bronze medal too. So there's also experience for Canada there.
Yeah, and look, there's no guarantee they're going to win a medal. It's a very competitive thing, but they could, not only could they win the medal, they could win the whole thing if they hit the race right. Like, it is that sort of tight, and we're seeing more and more of that in terms of the relay. It's not like 1984 anymore, or 1976 or something, when you probably really could just throw 4 guys together because other countries weren't really specializing in it either. The Americans used to be. When I first started watching the Olympics, for sure, the Americans win the gold medal if they didn't drop the baton.
Exactly. It's like, if they can get the exchange right, they're going to win. It was the same for us in '96. That's why we did good, because we could exchange the baton. But by the way, they did finish the race, the Americans, and it wasn't a disqualification. They didn't drop the baton or exchange it outside the lines, but they did struggle. And there's now a famous viral video where you see the Americans try to give it to each other. They're like fumbling and they both can't get it. And then that cost them a few seconds, which at the end of the day cost them a shot in the a shot to move on. So,
yeah, I've run relays, again, going back many years now, but you'd be surprised how difficult it is to do that. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. How hard can this be? We're just handing a baton to each other, but you're trying to hand a baton to each other while maintaining your speed.
Full speed while running, while sprinting, like full speed. Like, when you're almost losing balance and face planting while running as a normal human being, that's the speed they go at while trying to give each other something that's about 10 inches long. So there you go.
In a 20-meter pass zone.
Yes, in a curve 2 out of the 4 times, with people around you doing the same thing and like inches away from your face. So no, it's more complicated than it seems.
Yeah, the 400's pretty simple. You don't see that very often, but even that, there's a lot of jostling in that when you're doing it. We saw the 400 heats today too. The Canadian women qualified nicely there.
Yes, anyway, they finished 6th of their heat, but they finished 5th of their heat. Sorry, but the heat was really fast, and they qualified for the final.
Yeah, and that's going to be, well, the Jamaicans and the Americans are head and shoulders above the rest of the field there, but that battle for bronze is going to be like tight, tenths of a second stuff. So that should be a fun race to watch. A lot of fun at the track in the end of a track meet is always the best time, because all the relays do add a lot of fun. There's some mixed relays coming up in this one too, just like in swimming, which is a new wrinkle that we'll see. They were quite enjoyable at Doha when I watched those, and I didn't know they were coming to Doha either. So I was like, "Wait!"
So you're like, "Oh, wait, what?" Kind of like the way we reacted when we saw the mixed event this time around, which we loved earlier last week. Also, you mentioned the women's 4x400 relay. The bronze medal is really up for grabs, and it's going to be between Canada, between the Netherlands, between Poland, and Britain. Those are your 4 contenders there.
Yeah. And to go back to on topic that we're talking about now, the Poles, they absolutely have decided to put a lot of focus on their relays as specialties, and you're seeing them qualify for finals. And Poland's not exactly known as a sprinting powerhouse, but yet they're qualified.
It's not known as an athletics powerhouse. You're like, what? If it ain't pole vault, I was not expecting to see Poland there. Yeah. Not because of the pun here. It's because they're usually good at these sports, because like shot put, because you don't need a lot of resources to dedicate your talent to 2 athletes, right? You're like, okay, we got a field. We got 2 athletes. We got a coach. Here you go. Here's a metal ball. Here's your shot put. Here's a discus. Here's a vault and a mattress. You can train.
Exactly. I did find, as a very last thought on the day, because I probably should sleep at some point, the Polish got a runner in the 1,500-meter final as well tonight, and he unfortunately cramped up and didn't finish. Semifinal, I should say. Cramped up, didn't finish. His name
is, of course. Of course, his name is what? Go ahead.
Lewandowski.
Of course, it's Lewandowski. He scores when he wants, but not that time.
All right. And Soccer Today will return soon. We'll let you know on our socials.
Probably later today at some point. We'll let Duane have a night of sleep, and we'll see how we feel for today, by the way. And we'll get ready for sure for the women's football tournament final, which will be tomorrow at 8 a.m. So Duane and I will get ready. It will be one of our talking points tomorrow, the gold medal of the women's football tournament. Congratulations to the American. First bronze medal in the Olympic football tournament. I'm sure it's not as shiny and tasty as gold is, but still better than nothing. So congratulations to the U.S. women's national team. On that note, we'll be back tomorrow. If you want to quickly take a look at the medal standings before we say goodbye. China, 34 golds, 29 for the U.S. Japan, 22nd. Australia, 17 gold medals so far after day 13. The Rock has 16 gold medals. And Great Britain, 6 with 16. Also Canada, now 14. We are back in 14th position. We got a few since yesterday because we got a couple more gold, and it's a golden morning once again for Canada with Damian Warner. Now 5 golds, 5 silvers, and 8 bronze medals for 18 total medals for Canada, which is a pretty good tally so far in the Summer Games. Between 20 and 25 is always a good result for Canada at the Summer Games. And until then, until the next time we come and talk about our Olympics, you can follow Duane on social media. You can follow myself at Kev Laramee and this show at Five Rings Podcast. Until tomorrow, have a great soccer. Or also Olympiad.